Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 12th of February of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kyiv, because this morning the Russians carried out massive missile strike all of the entire capital of Ukraine. There were lots of explosions, we have a lot of videos, consequences, fire, and many other videos and pictures that confirm significant damage that the Russians managed to deal as a result of massive missile strike. And according to information we have, the Russians mainly were using Iskander missiles. Later, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation provided us more details. The Russians reported that this morning the armored force of the Russian Federation launched a group missile strike on the workshops of Ukraine military industrial complex enterprises producing drones, so different FPV drones that Ukraine used along the line of combat contact. Obviously, this is very important for the Russian army because most likely the Russians managed to destroy several very powerful and big workshops, which will lead maybe even to collapse of supply and support of some units along the line of combat contact from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sudzha direction, where we got lots of very important updates. Telling the truth, we have lots of icons as you can see, but there some line of combat contact, clashes, and Russian offensive operation of course is very important, but the most important updates are coming from the settlement by the name of Ivana Darina. This morning we have already discussed, the previous video we have already discussed that about some genocide or about some violence and war crimes committed by the Ukrainian forces, and during the day we got additional updates. So let's discuss in details. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that in Nikolaeva, Darina, Kursk region, Ukraine armed forces militants killed almost all the men. According to the department, local residents were held hostage by Ukraine armed forces for more than 6 months. As a result of these events, only one man survived. The circumstances of the incident are being clarified. So first was the statement of the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, and basically we've just discussed this. Later we got another video. In this video we can see people that managed to survive from that massacre, so let's discuss this article in detail. Massacre in Kursk region. Ukrainian forces kill all men in villages. One of such acts of genocide took place in the liberated village of Nikolaeva Darina, that was stated by pro-Russian resource. Local residents who survived the occupation told in details what was happening in the village during the entire stay of the Ukrainian armed forces militants in the captured settlement. The Minister of Defense confirmed that people were in the village as hostages. According to local residents, Ukraine armed forces killed 20 people. Only one man remained in the village. There were 53 people when we did not have time to leave. 33 remained. There were no men left. So obviously the Russian investigation committee will continue collecting evidences, and most likely the Russians will make very difficult decisions based on the situation that took place in the village. Once again, this information was provided us by pro-Russian resources. We need more time, of course, we need more proofs, but I believe that this is not the last case in the Sudzha direction. I believe that every time the Russians enter any village in this area, including Sudzha, we're going to receive more and more updates of the type. Now let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact. As you can see, we have lots of icons. Let's discuss the most important of them. First, let's discuss the icon that we got from the settlement of Sumy. In this video, we can see how the Russians managed to discover the concentration of Ukrainian forces in the building in the vicinity of Sumy. The Russians are saying that this temporary deployment point was used by the Ukrainians at the warehouse, ammo depot. The Russians attacked this building with Gerain drone. Then there was a secondary detonation and the entire ammo depot was blown, as you can see. Based on this video, we can see that the entire building was completely destroyed. Another video is coming from Sudzha itself. In this video we can see some farms or some constructions or some facilities that were used by the Ukrainians as maybe warehouse or ammo depot or temporary deployment point, and the Russians attacked this territory with several Iskander missiles or maybe with FABs. As a result of explosions, the Ukrainians suffered loss. At least several warehouses were destroyed. So we see that the Russians intensifying their activities in this area. The weather allows the Russians to continue their offensive operation. Now let's discuss about the results. According to information we have, as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly on the territory of the settlement by the name of Sverdlikova. In this video we can see the Ukrainians that were bombing the Russian units. Based on the video that was published by the Ukrainian side, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. And we see that there is a certain dynamic in this village. Furthermore, according to different pro-Russian resources, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the western and the central part of the settlement. The Ukrainians control just the eastern part, but most likely tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back further in the eastern directions towards Lebedivka or towards the city of Sudzha itself. As you can see, during the day we got lots of icons of how the Russians were bombing and attacking, how the Russians were hunting and destroying Ukrainian vehicles using fiber optic drones, how the Russians were attacking Ukrainians with artillery. So the situation is very critical for the armed forces of Ukraine in this area, and most likely the Russians are going to continue their offensive. But the most important updates are coming from the settlement by the name of Guyeva. In this video we can see that the Russians began clearing the settlement with a significant number of drones. This video and there are lots of episodes confirm that the Russians are planning to clear this territory, then to cross the river of Psol and to continue offensive operation towards the settlement of Yunakivka, more precisely towards the N07 road that Ukrainians still have possibilities to use as a main supply arterial, despite the fact that the Russians already established complete FPV drone and artillery fire control over this territory. I'll remind you that today Zelensky also stated that he is planning to change the Sudzha direction for something else. He said that he wants to offer Russia a direct exchange of territory, giving the lands that Ukrainian armed forces have occupied in the Kursk region to Russia since the start of offensive. And most likely he will try to ask, let's say, the territory around Zaporozhye nuclear power plant or maybe something else, but Russia will never accept anything from the Ukrainian side, and most likely, and according to different Russian authorities, Ukrainians will have nothing. The Russians will take under control Sudzha direction and they will force Ukrainians to fall back. This information was reported by the Dmitry Peskov. He is the press secretary of the Russian president. This is impossible. Russia has never discussed and will not discuss the topic of exchanging its territories. Ukraine units will be expelled from this territory. All those who are not destroyed will be expelled. So that was stated by official Russian authorities. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction, itself. As for the northern part, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received anything special. There was just one video. The Ukrainians managed to restore another pontoon bridge over the river of Oskol, but the Russians discovered the bridge and destroyed it. Usually when the Russians destroy a Ukrainian bridge in this or that direction, this means that the Russians are about to begin another offensive operation, and the destroyed bridge, and the main purpose of destroying the bridge is to destroy Ukrainian logistics. The most important updates are coming from the southern Kupiansk direction, more precisely from the Liman area. According to information we have, the Russians during the previous 24 hours managed to improve their position significantly around the settlement of Yampolovka. Telling the truth, and we expect that tomorrow or the day after, the armed forces of Russian Federation will take this territory under complete control, and the Russians will reach the northern outskirts of the settlement of Tarskoye. So we see that Ukrainians have almost lost their positions on the Russian side of the river of Zherebets, and most likely this is going to happen during the next several days. Furthermore, according to different sources, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the vicinity of Makeivka by taking under control another tree line. We have video published by the Ukrainian side. In this video we can see how the Ukrainians were attacking the Russian soldiers that were attacking this territory. So as for now, we haven't adjusted the map in Russian favor because we don't have any geolocation from this part, but we are just keeping this information in our minds. Today we have a lot of icons and a lot of very big activity of the armed force of Russian Federation in the Sivers direction. And the Russians, I remind you that several weeks ago, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the eastern part of the settlement by the name of Verkhnykamenskaya. So basically the Russians took under control probably the strongest stronghold in this area. Now the Russians are about to finish regrouping and begin offensive in the western direction. Another important video is coming to us from the settlement of Bilogorovka. As you can see, we have adjusted the map completely in the Russian favor. In this video we can see how the Russian soldiers were moving in the most western part of the settlement, in this part, and how Ukrainians were attacking the Russians. Based on this video we have colored the territory of Bilogorovka completely. Maybe there is just one street left under complete Ukraine control, but I believe currently it doesn't matter. The Russians most likely will begin offensive very soon. Also, another important thing, that right before we start making the video, pro-Ukrainian sources reported that the Russians began offensive operation in the area of Vasyukovka. Let's wait for additional updates, and most likely tomorrow we're gonna receive first results from this area. If this information is correct, then the Russians have begun their final offensive with the purpose to outflank the city of Siversk from behind and to defeat the Ukrainians there. As for the Chasiv Yar and the Toretsk direction, during the previous 24 hours, the most important updates are coming from the city of Chasiv Yar. We've been expecting for the previous months that the Russians first will try to take under control the city of Chasiv Yar. They will try to clear this territory and to force the Ukrainians to fall back. But today we start receiving very interesting updates that tell us completely different picture. According to information we have, the Russians began another offensive operation, but from the northern part of the city of Chasiv Yar towards the settlement by the name of Maiskaya. The Russians are attacking from the southeast this settlement, and the Russians are attacking the same settlement from the east. The main purpose of this offensive operation is to improve the Russian positions, improve the Russian foothold in this area, to take additional territories under complete control, and to get as close as possible to the road N20. So most likely the Russians have prepared something interesting in this area. Most likely the Russians will try to win the battle for Slaviansk and Kramatorsk using very interesting and tricky approaches. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. As for the Pokrovsk direction, this is probably the only area where the Ukrainians have more or less good success. According to information we have, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the settlement of Peshchane. The Russians reported completely different thing. The Russians are saying that they managed to repel the attacks from Ukrainian side and to restore control over the settlement. And the Russians published one proof. They published video with the flag. And from this video it's very difficult to understand whether the Russians have strong control over the settlement. Maybe this flag was established by the drone, who knows what happened. But anyway, we decided to keep the southern part of this mine under complete Russian control, despite the fact that we had lots of videos how the Ukrainians were taken under control the most important part, the central part of this area. And telling the truth, there are very high chances that Ukrainians, as a result of several counterattacks, are able to restore control over this salient between the settlements of Uspenovka and Peshchane, and everything to the north could be restored by the Ukrainians in the very near future. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Andreevka fortified area direction. The Russians most likely are about to take the settlement of Andreevka under complete control. During the day we got a lot of icons, we got a lot of changes on map according to different mappers. So according to pro-Ukrainian sources, according to neutral sources, the Russians managed to reach the western outskirts of the settlement of Andreevka. And from these positions, the Russians can advance in any direction. The Russians can attack Constantinople from behind, and this is what we might see in the very near future. The Russians can continue offensive operation further in the direction of Alexeyevka. Different sources reported that currently the Russians are trying to attack between the settlement of Constantinople and the settlement of Ulakli, with the purpose to attack Ulakli from behind. If the Russians are able to carry out and to complete these operations, this is going to be a complete disaster for the armed forces of Ukraine in this pocket. While the Ukrainians try to understand what the Russians are planning to do next, the Russians continue tightening the news around this pocket, and according to this geolocation and according to video published by the Russian side, we have adjusted the map to the south of Dachny. In this video we can see how the Russian soldiers were clearing these territories, one stronghold after another. Very interesting updates are coming from the settlement of Velika Novoselovka. As you can see, just during one day we got 5 icons with flags in this area. We got lots of updates from neutral mappers, from pro-Ukrainian sources, from pro-Ukrainian mappers, that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their position significantly. Currently the Russians are advancing in the direction of Novoselka. The Russians are trying to outflank the company's stronghold located to the northwest of Velika Novoselka. The Russians are trying to improve their positions and to attack Dnieproenergia. So as you can see, the Russians are moving using broad front line of attack. So we believe that during the next several days, the Russians will intensify their activities with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to bring additional reinforcements and reserves in this area, because if the Ukrainians don't bring forces here, most likely the entire line of defense will collapse automatically under the pressure of the armed force of Russian Federation. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.